So I couldn't tell whether it was Paul or Rich, but one of you has a mic that's hot enough to put a lot of background noise in. Could you mute unless you're speaking? I fixed it. Thank you. People are still joining. We will give a few minutes for the join rate to slow down. All right, it looks like the join rate is slowed significantly. We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining. This is our monthly tools call meeting. If you are willing, please share video. We like this to be a conversation as close to around a table in a room as we can get. Do remember that the session is being recorded and will appear on YouTube a little later. The agenda is on the notes page. Everybody has access to that. Does anyone have any agenda bashes before we start? As a reminder, we're not using the queuing feature during this interim. The group is small enough that it's fine to just jump in when you have something to say. If we end up in a conversation that needs queue management, I'll call for the queue at that time. Otherwise, just treat this as an open floor and jump in whenever you have a comment to make. All right. Well, we'll start. Our first hot topic for discussion is progress on the email transition to the new IT infrastructure. As you note, we had several dates scheduled to make this transition and chose to defer on each of them. The development is still ongoing and uncovering things that need to be addressed before we can actually make the transition. One of the larger ones that we ran into really quite late in the game is that the SES service at Amazon will rewrite message IDs and date headers as messages flow through it, full stop. You can't make it not do that. That breaks some of our applications and definitely would violate the expectations of our user base. Making DKIM and other techniques for end-to-end message signaling fail to work. So we are exploring other options. We're at the beginning stages of that exploration, so we don't have a lot to report on this call, other than the transition itself is going to be significantly delayed. Martin, did you have anything you wanted to add? Anyone have any questions?
I don't have anything to add. That does cover it. It appears to be a complete dead end in SES, and there isn't any way of getting around the header rewriting, and there is some date rewriting that is problematic as well.
All right. We'll go through most of the rest of the notes. We don't have any other major hot topics to bring up, but we have made progress in several areas. Kasara notes that Zulip has been upgraded. We're staying on the 8 release series, major release series. Zulip has started a 9 release. It has some significant model changes. The UI changes its name of things, streams become channels. Other changes like this will be setting up at some point in the future a staging instance of Zulip 9, and on top of the transition database, and asking for community feedback to see if there's anything that we need to address before we make that major change. Kasara, would you talk to us a little bit about what we're doing with playing Medico sessions?
So all the IETF sessions so far, they are hosted on meteco.com, and now Meteco is uploading those session data to R2 instance, R2 bucket managed by LLC. So going forward, there'll be links on data tracker to metecoplayer.itf.org, where you can go and watch all the IETF sessions and interim sessions. One change that will come with the data tracker change is there'll be linked to interim meetings for IETF session, interim sessions on data tracker, which we don't have at the moment. So you can go ahead and do the same session replay as in IETF meetings.
As a reminder, Meteco has open sourced the player for the Meteco sessions. And if you remember, the difference between using that player and looking at YouTube is you get the synchronized chat, polls, and other meeting artifacts on playout with the slides, etc. Kasara has done some clever things that he hasn't pointed to that I'd like to call out. Working with the team, we're able to utilize Cloudflare workers to do the compute part of playing things out instead of using our own origin server. So
I've just posted a link to the Meteco player for IETF 120 for those of you who've never seen it before or unfamiliar with it. So it's in the chat, so you can see what they currently look like.
And related, one thing that I will call out that is important, there are a few working groups that are using other tools to meet for interims besides Meteco. and there is impedance right now for them to get their recordings attached to the data tracker. Their recordings are showing up in YouTube. They won't, of course, be available on the Medeco player because they weren't recorded by Medeco. But we do have work in front of us to make it reasonable to attach meetings held in other platforms, the recordings of meetings held on other platforms, to the data tracker meeting artifacts. All right, any other questions about the Medeco player? Jennifer, you want to touch on highlights of what's happening with data tracker?
Sure. I guess the big thing I've called out here is that we've had a few periods over the last few weeks of like sort of borderline denial of service, heavy bot traffic coming from a couple of sources that are making lots of calls that are slipping through the Cloudflare protection that we have in place. We long-term are planning work in order to speed up or reduce the computational cost of those endpoints. We know that's the part of the long-term fix. In the meantime, we've been catching these things as they come and blocking them, which is like playing whack-a-mole. We've identified a couple of configuration issues, well, some combination of configuration issues and just limitations of the way the Cloudflare caching works that make it relatively easy for effectively script kiddies to hammer us with query strings that dodge our caching. So we plan some mitigation to try to reduce the cost of those on the back end. I think the last time we talked about this, it was asked why we don't just scale data tracker. That is something that we can do. In this case, I think it would effectively let the bots or malicious users just run twice as many processes and tie us up again. So I think we need to make that just less computationally expensive. So these have been happening, a few minutes at a time. They fortunately haven't been long-lived attacks, but hopefully we'll get those under control shortly and stop having these brief outages.
All right, if there aren't any other questions, Kasara and Songho have put content into the notes about what's happening with the bibxml service and XML RFC. If there are questions about those, jump in. I would like to highlight that we've begun making much more rapid progress on the RPC project. We're now to the point where we are iterating with Gene in particular in the RPC on the workflow management project frequently and finding things that we're needing to change. One of the things that we realized that was different from our initial model and what's really needed is the activities around accepting a document into the queue, which we're calling enqueuing a document, play out over time. There's several actions that take place and maybe several people that need to participate in it. We had modeled it as a thing that happened once. So it was basically and at a single point in time originally. So it was effectively a single add this document to the queue screen. We're making the adjustments to recognize that this is a process, not just a single action. and that's having some good pressure on what the interface of the application for the RPC is going to be. So high point is that we're now at the state where we've got velocity back up to about where we were before we started the IT transition project on that project. One of the next big steps on this is to build a deployed instance through the CI/CD pipeline that we can use with the RPC to say, hey, we've made this change, we've just deployed it, go look, as opposed to right now, hey, we've made this change, go update everything on your laptop, get everything running, and look at it there. And that will also be useful for the RFC editor website work, which has started to have a live in the cloud point to iterate on with the RFC editor website work, which I'll now pass to Matthew to talk about.
Cool. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, so we've started bootstrapping the new RFC editor website. It's going to follow a similar set of technologies to the RPC website. I could name drop a bunch of tech if people are interested, but I assume not. And yeah, it's making good progress. I've implemented most of the homepage sort of and desktop and responsive views and mobile menus and things like that. And then I'll be looking at building out the rest of the page templates and things like that in the coming weeks. There's a note in there with a link to the repo, and there's some screenshots in various PRs. Notably, PR 1 and 4 have screenshots if people want to see what the current version looks like. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yep. All right. I don't know if Joe is on the call. He's added some text about where we are on Yang catalog. And Jay, you've added during the meeting a section on the accessibility report, if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, so briefly. So the RFC series consulting editor, Alexis Rossi, has commissioned a report from a specialist accessibility consultancy, Prime Access Consulting, on the accessibility issues with our HTML and SVG that we use to publish RFCs with. It's a very detailed report, about 37 pages long, has a lot of useful things in there. Prime Access Consulting are largely, or the people doing the work are largely visually impaired, a number of them since birth, and therefore use a variety of assisted technology in order to be able to use the web. And so we've got a lot of very useful information from that. A blog post will be published either today or tomorrow with some highlights from that Alexis has written. And then the next stage will be for us to add guidelines into the author's website for ID and RFC authors to understand what can be done to improve accessibility. We then have some possible changes that can be done to the HTML that has been used since the XML was introduced, RFC 8500 or something, because that is pure HTML, and with some changes we can make that more accessible. But we have a very big problem with our first 8,000 or so RFCs when it comes to the HTML, in that basically the HTML is a single pre-block with the text file inside the pre-block and then closing of the pre-block, and screen readers read out every space, every every little bit of a pre-block, and so we are probably going to have to look at trying to get some form of grant or external funding or something if we want to go back to get some people to do a lot of manual effort of converting all of these into ordinary HTML so that they can be read by people who need to use assistive technology. So that's basically where we are with that, and the details of these things will be published, as I said, later today or tomorrow.
A quick question: do we have any rough idea on how large a grant we would need for something like that? Like wild guess?
My wild guess is $1 million, but
Okay.
I'm wondering if actually I'm overdoing it. I'm just trying to work out how many person hours is required for doing each document, or the number of pages in total, and that. I mean, I haven't done a proper calculation, to be honest, so it could be a quarter of that possibly, but it's something in that order anyway.
Okay. Wow. I was thinking, a couple of $1,000s to write a script, which would do stuff.
Yeah, so Jay's envisioning work that is on the order of creating V3 XML to represent the older RFCs and having them render through the pipeline that we have, the same pipeline that's making the modern HTML, as opposed to doing something like fixing, rewriting the RFC to HTML script that is currently generating the pre-blocks to generate something that's not the pre-blocks.
Okay.
We are open to other ideas, to be honest. This is only just in the last week just started inventing things. So if there are better ways and cheaper ways to do it, it's certainly possible. And we will want to talk to the accessibility consultancy as well to understand what they think would be a good way forward.
Apologies, I thought my video was on. Apparently it wasn't. So I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it turns out that this is actually the sort of thing that AI-related tools actually do well, is given a big sample of existing text and existing XML specifications to be able to train them to translate out. Now, that's not going to be perfect, especially because the older ones do tend to be in more funky formats, but I think you'd be surprised that that might be a good starting place for them to be tuned by, manually after that. But as I said, I never recommend AI tools, so I can't believe I just said that.
Okay, it sounds as if we really ought to have some form of discussion, brainstorm, or a working document or something for people to have ideas on different mechanisms that we could use for this, and then we then get the consultant to review those and give us some ideas from their perspective about the quality of outcome and other things. Well, this is just early days, so we'll come back to this later then.
Were you looking at doing all the RFCs, or as a first pass you could cut out those that were obsoleted by?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know is the answer. I'm literally just flying a kite here that if we wanted to do this, it's a big job to do.
I think it's cool.
Awesome. So we have a relatively short call today. The content is such that, as we've been focusing on the details of transition and whatnot, we haven't had a lot more built out. We do have some time available if someone has a topic they want to spend it on. So if we've got any other business, or if there are things that we should be focusing on in the near term that we're not, it would be good to talk about them now. I'm not hearing any call for any other business. I think we can go ahead and conclude. Thank everyone again for the time that they spend on these calls. And we will talk. We have another call next month. And then we will see people either in person or online at IETF 121. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.